Hi, everyone. Welcome to Thanks for Sharing. I am your host, Jackie Pack, and I have with me today a guest who has never been on my podcast before. I have my husband, Jeff. Welcome, Jeff, to the podcast.
My pleasure.
So I talked to Jeff. I did my podcast episode with my girls, with my daughters, our daughters. I had told him that I would want to do a podcast episode with him as well, talking about from his perspective, what it was like to be married to a therapist. We don't have a script that we're going to follow. We're just going to go from there. But we recently had our wedding anniversary. Our anniversary is on March 11th. And we've done different things over the years on our anniversary. The past couple of years, if it's during the week, we're both working. And in the evening, we might go out for drinks. We might go out for dessert or something. And we'll talk about our anniversary. We'll talk about the past year. We reflect on all of the years that we've been together, because we obviously knew each other longer than we have been married, and the surprises of life that were unexpected, and we were pleasantly surprised, and some of the hard things that we've gone through. We didn't do that last year because I think last year we were planning to do that. And then I started not feeling good. And by evening, I had just gone downhill. And the next day, I think I tested positive for COVID, which was the first time either of us, because I got COVID from you. It was the first time either of us had COVID. And so, needless to say, last year by evening, I was really not doing well. So we didn't do anything last year for our anniversary. This year also, kind of a crazy day. We had talked about our anniversary the weekend before. I woke up. Jeff was in the shower. I was thinking, I'm going to tell him after he gets out, I'll say happy anniversary. And he thought he had a work meeting at 7:30. So he gets out of the shower, he's getting ready. And then all of a sudden he said, oh no, my meeting's at 7, not 7:30. So he ran downstairs to the office to jump on the meeting. I left before he was off the meeting. Yeah. And you were coming to my office. It's not this long ago. It's just that there has been a lot that has happened this past week. He was coming to my office to fix a vent in one of the therapist's offices that there's no air circulation. And I've asked the landlord to fix it. And eventually I just said, will you come fix it? So then I texted him, hey, can you also get some water? Bring that up to the office, because we were running low on bottled water. Then I get to the office and realize our fridge had died over the weekend. So I texted him and said, if you're shopping at Costco for water, could you also stop and price their fridges and get a fridge and bring it in? To which Jeff responded, Jackie, my car is not this big. And I was like, right, okay, sorry. So anyway, we were doing that. It was just kind of this rushed morning that wasn't the plan. He came up, I think we got the fridge the next day. And then I think later that afternoon, I was like, oh, right, it was our anniversary. And I never said happy anniversary. So I texted you and was like, apparently this is what 32 years looks like. But I had told him I wanted to record a podcast episode just talking about marriage and being married for 32 years, talking about, because like I had asked my daughters, like it is an experience, I think, having your mom being a therapist. I think it's also something for your spouse. If your spouse is a therapist, then somehow it also impacts you more so than I would say your career or your job impacts me. Would you agree?
I agree, but let me just clarify what my official position is at Healing Pass. It is water boy and maintenance, and I know my position. I do it very well.
Right.
So let's also clarify, we don't have a script. It's kind of the same way Jackie cooks. She doesn't follow the recipe, and if there is a recipe, it is simply modified as we go. So we're going to just take this a little at a time and see what happens. I think one of your suggestion questions was the first one.
Before we get into that, though, I will say I am a good cook. So modifications or whatever, I am a good cook.
What are my initial thoughts about becoming a therapist?
About me becoming a therapist?
You becoming a therapist. It's all I've known. I mean, it's been a journey. It is a journey to be a spouse of a therapist. But again, it's all I've known. And I think you've come a long way in the journey. And we have come with you. And that's not a bad thing. We can talk more about growth and change and how that has affected our family.
Yeah. Maybe let's start because before we got married, we had known each other 6 years. I think I was doing the math the other day. And to be clear, we knew each other prior to that. So Jeff and I grew up on the same street. And his house was like maybe 5 houses down and across the street from mine. Is that right?
More than 5, probably 8 to 10.
There's not 10. I've counted.
Anyway, it's down the street.
So it was like maybe 6, let's settle with 6. 6 houses down the street and across the street from my house. And how old were you? Do you know when you moved into that house?
It was 2.
Okay, and I was 3. I am a year older than Jeff, which he really likes to play that up. Part of the year, I'm a year and 4 months older. So then he really likes to be like, oh, she's more than a year older than me. So our families would have moved in around the same time if he was 2 and I was 3. And so in the LDS culture, especially in Utah, the congregations, they do it by where you live, location-wise. And so they add up so many families per ward is what it's called. A congregation is a ward. And then they draw the boundaries to make that many families, that many people in the ward. And so most of my life growing up, Jeff was in a different ward than I was. And so we didn't go to church at the same time. We went to the same church building, but we didn't go at the same time. And so, I will say I have memories of Jeff's mom. I remember Judy Pack because my mom always made us walk to school. And Jeff's mom, she was softer than that. And so she would drive the kids to school. And sometimes on a cold morning, like I didn't mind walking if the weather was nice. But if it was a cold morning and me and my friend Amy were walking to school and we'd see Judy Pack coming in the truck with a camper shell over it, and we'd be like, it's Judy Pack, look really cold. And so me and my friend would like look really cold, and Judy would pull over and be like, hey girls, do you want to ride? And of course we did. That's what we were trying to do. And so we would get into the back of what's it called? The shell of the back of the truck covered by a shell. I don't know if Jeff was in the front. I don't have any memories of Judy's kids being there. I just remember Amy and I wanting to get a ride to school when it was cold. And so I have memories of Jeff's mom, like elementary school and stuff. And then it's not like we hung with the same groups because again, you get to know the people that you're going to church with. And if you're not going to church with them, I mean, they might live across the street and you just don't really talk to them that much. You talk to the people you're at church with. So then when I was starting my 10th grade year, you would have been in 9th grade, they realigned the boundaries. So they had to redraw the boundaries for whatever reason. And so my side of the street was pushed into Jeff's ward. And I think my age, there were 3 teenagers in that ward that were my age. Me, another girl, and a boy who never came to church. And then Jeff's age group, you guys had a bunch of people your age, boys and girls. But there was a large group of boys Jeff's age. There was a large group of girls Jeff's age. And so when we went to Sunday school or different things like that, they would put, well, the first year, it was me and this girl and our teacher, which happened to be Jeff's uncle. And that was just super awkward. Every week there were 3 of us, 2 of us, and then this older man. And then the next year, I think they were like, let's just put him in with this younger group where there's a lot of kids. So they put us into Sunday school and stuff with Jeff's age group. And I feel like that's when I started to get to know you because we were in the same space and right?
Yeah, I agree. Other than I remember walking to school and my mother never taking me. So no, that was your social network, was that congregation. And there was the youth program there. And so we never interacted with each other, as weird as that may sound.
Right.
Didn't know each other till 14, 15.
I mean, I would have been 15. You would have been 14.
Yeah.
And so I was getting to know them at church. And then I remember one night, you and some friends came over to my house. And again, I've talked before, relationally, I was somewhat awkward. He obviously had issues. Not that Jeff didn't have issues, but they're very different than the issues I had. And so Jeff and his friends came over, and I think my mom came and was like, hey, people are at the door for you. And I went to the door, and they're standing there, and they were like, hey, we were just wondering if you want to come hang out with us. And I said, well, what would we do? I don't know why I don't know why. Like, it's not like I had these other plans or my social calendar
You
was
had
so
better
full.
options going on.
Right. I was sitting in my room. So, but I said, well, what would we do? And you said, or I don't remember if it was you or one of your friends, but they were like, eat Doritos, drink Mountain Dew and stuff. And I was just like, well, that's quite the proposal there.
I think you could drive. Could you drive? Or I don't remember.
I would have gotten my license during that year. I don't know if I had it then. And so I was like, okay. And so I think we went to Kim Smith's house and we hung out at his house. And then after that, we just hang out. And we were like, all of a sudden, I was in your friend group.
Well, and I think in church, they moved your age group into our class.
Yes. Yeah. But after that, like, I would hang out outside of church. We didn't really hang out at school together, but I would hang out after school or whatever. I would hang out with you and your friends. A few of you had a handful of friends, and I would hang out with you guys. Right?
I was very popular, had all kinds of friends, so I don't remember.
I mean, I had friends, they just did not live by me, and yours lived by you.
I think you're right.
So we were friends for a long time. And then I graduated high school. I graduated a year before you, and I went to college 4 hours away. And you were going to do your senior year. I think I knew, not right at the beginning, but I think I had a sense. I think I've talked to you about this before. So don't say that I'm wrong when we're recording. But I think I had a sense that Jeff would be interested in more than friendship. But I think Jeff knew me well enough, or at least you could sense that that was not something that I was open to. And so you never like pushed that. I don't think you even ever said anything about it.
I think you're very bad at picking up on it, or it wasn't comfortable and you didn't want to go there, because I was definitely the hunter in the relationship.
Yeah.
For sure.
But I don't think, I mean, maybe you were sending signals, but they weren't really overt. Because at that point, if I went to a school dance, I would take somebody that I thought only saw me as a friend. And if they let on that they might see me more as a friend, I stopped talking to them.
Right. And I think I got my feelings hurt multiple times, because I'm like, what the hell? I'm here. We hang out. We do things. And you ask Ken Chowan or somebody else from...
I never went to a dance with Ken.
Others other than me. And so I was like, what's going on? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I graduated high school. I was going to go away to college. I did go away to college. And you were having your senior year. And I think the summer before I left for college, I think that's the first time that you brought it up, that you might be interested in more than friends. And I remember saying to you, why would we do that? Like, and I remember saying to you, I would rather be friends for life than boyfriend, girlfriend for a limited time and then hate each other. And I remember you being surprised, like, well, why would we hate each other? And I was like, well, because that's what people do. Clearly, you're not aware of that. And so we did not date before I went to college. And then during your senior year, you started dating somebody.
Multiple people, yes.
Yes. And one of them you started getting serious with. And she was not really keen on the idea that your best friend was a female.
I do remember that.
And I had not factored that into my whole algorithm, because I was thinking we'll just be best friends for life. I wasn't thinking of other people. In my mind, I was never going to get married and I was never going to have kids. And then neither were you. And we were just going to be best friends forever. And then all of a sudden, here comes this other girl and you're interested in her and you're dating her. And I remember coming home from college for the summer and you just weren't as available, which you shouldn't have been. You had a girlfriend, but I was like, Well, this is kind of cramping my style.
No, agreed. And I wasn't anticipating telling this story, but yeah. Yeah, I think we talked one time and I think you saw the light and were like, I don't like this.
Yes. I don't think you made it easy for me. I was wanting to like get around the bush and have you get it.
I don't think I was torturing you. Maybe I was just thick headed.
No, you were making me say it. Probably because I had hurt your feelings a lot of times.
Okay.
Not intentionally. And I wasn't aware of that, but I'm sure I had. So you had said, I think I did say, I don't like this. This was not part of my plan. But I think you were saying, I think you made me, like you asked me, so what are you saying? And I just wanted you to know. But you wouldn't just go along with me being vague. And
I think you did say it.
I did say it. I had to. Because you eventually were like, so if I break up with her, then what? And I had said, well, I guess we could date.
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
I'm the winner. Right.
So anyway, so then it was still, we didn't get married right away. You left on an LDS mission. Shortly after that, for 2 years, I went to college, finished my bachelor's degree. You got home. We got married after that. And then I was going to start grad school. So now that picks up when I was becoming a therapist, because by the time we were married, I had my bachelor's degree and knew I was going to get my master's degree.
I think we decided that was the best move, was to pursue your school. And so we packed everything up and moved in a short amount of time when you got accepted.
Right. We had to move across the country from Utah to Louisiana. And I remember a couple of things, because like I said, I was not planning on getting married ever. I remember we had conversations before we got married. We had conversations about, I remember telling you, I cannot be financially dependent on you. And I remember saying, like, because of my mom's situation, and I mean, my mom at least had a degree, but she didn't work for years and eventually had to go back to work because it wasn't safe for her to be financially dependent on my dad. And I remember saying to you, not that I don't think I could be. The fact that I think I could be financially dependent on you is what is making me have this conversation about marriage. But I just don't know that I can do that piece. And I remember you being like, sounds good to me. That's fine with me. You make money too.
Conversation of, it just makes sense. You're further along in school. Which is opposite to the culture we grew up in,
right,
where the woman supports the man and the man graduates from college first and gets it done. So we kind of were an oddball in the system where you went first.
Yeah, we prioritized my education before yours.
It's fine.
I think we talked about you starting school while I was there, but we couldn't get approved for housing if you didn't have a job.
Yeah.
And so you worked and I went to school.
Fine. It was just, it worked out. I worked, you went to school. It was quite an adventure.
Yeah. I think it was good for our marriage. So had we been married a year when we moved?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. So shortly after getting married, we got married in March and I think we moved in August. Just hauled across the country and moved and didn't know anybody, It was its own adventure for the two of us and bonded us together in that way.
Yeah. I mean, pre-internet, pre-cell phone.
Yeah.
As weird as that sounds. You know?
Mm-hmm. And the Eastern United States is very different from the Western, and Louisiana was very different than Utah. There was just a lot of, I will often say it was educational on so many levels, not just my schooling.
Yeah. And I think we were alone. We didn't have friends. Did we make some friends through the church? And yeah, we did, and
through my school.
Yeah. And I don't know that they were real deep friendships, but they were. So we had to rely on each other. I think we grew together in that time.
Right.
For sure. We had one car, so it was either you dropping me off or me dropping you off and back and forth. And yeah, it was crazy times.
Yeah. So yeah, when we were heading into marriage, you knew that I wanted to be a therapist. I didn't know I was going to work in sex addiction or anything like that. That came later. but you knew I was going to be a therapist.
Yeah, I think one of your questions was there any misconceptions or thing? And again, it's all I've known, but I think we've worked through it over the years of what your career path, where it started and where it ended up, and how you started in addiction. So, I mean, I didn't have any preconceived ideas of what it would look like because I didn't really, I mean, my parents should have both been in therapy and have never been in therapy. And so I didn't know what it would really look like.
Right. And I will say I think it's not ironic. I think it makes sense for me in my family of origin and the role that I played. It makes sense that the person I was going to marry lived down the street from me and knew my family, knew of my family before really we were hanging out and spending time together. You knew of my family. And then you got to know each of us more in depth as we started hanging out and being together.
Yeah, I think we can look back in old photo albums and we see your family or my family in Halloween pictures or in a neighborhood of, oh, there's a group of kids. Oh, look, there's your brothers or there's my brothers. So, I mean, we knew of you, just didn't know you.
Right.
Weird to say that, but you were in the neighborhood, but
Yeah.
you weren't in our social group.
Right. Whereas with a lot of my siblings, the people they married, I think everybody but my oldest sister's spouse, he never met my dad. But the rest of my siblings' spouses met my dad. Usually they met him at the wedding.
So I will say, I knew your family from a young age. One experience when I was 11 or 12 and wintertime in Utah and on a Sunday, and we're ditching Sunday school class and throwing snowballs at car. We picked out your dad's car and pelted him with snowballs. Didn't know it was him. And at the time, I don't think I knew his name, but he stopped, got out, proceeded to chase us for a short amount of time and yell. But yeah, I mean, I got to know your brothers. I knew your mother before we were married. Yeah, I know your family. For years, I've known your family.
Yeah. And you saw some of the dysfunction. I had described it to you, but you saw it both from my mom and from my dad. Nobody else's spouses in my family ever witnessed that.
Just lucky, I guess. Yeah, I got to see into some of that. And again, coming from a dysfunctional family, a different kind of dysfunction. Did I recognize it? Did I see it? Well, I see it now. Did I really see it then? A little bit.
You mean in your family or in
your family?
Well, I think the two incidents that I'm thinking of, you were pretty shocked.
I would agree. I mean,
and I was trying to minimize it for you. Like, Jeff, this is not that big of a deal. But that's not, the dysfunction of my family was not the dysfunction of your family.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You're right.
And mine was much more palpable, visible, not to everybody. Again, we had those secrets. A lot of people thought we were a very functional family to be admired.
Right. Here's your family on Sunday. That's the picture everybody sees. Right. Not the behind closed doors. Yeah.
Right. And that's not, your family was not, they weren't yellers. There wasn't abuse, physical, like that type of stuff.
Well, he's abuse. Did you get hit with a wooden spoon? Absolutely. Yardstick, occasional hanger. Yes. I mean,
right.
Spanked as a child. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So we moved to Louisiana. I do remember too, because it was different. A lot of the students there in our ward were there for their husbands. The husband's schooling is what brought them there. And they always assumed that about you.
Right. We were the oddball.
Yes. And then it would be like, no, we're here for Jackie's schooling. And they'd be like, well, are you going to school? No, I'm working. And it was just that, to me, I knew there were things before this, which is why I agreed to marry you, that made me feel safe and like that I could get married to you. But I think this was another one of those, like, I remember thinking how he is handling this, and it didn't seem to bother like you. You didn't feel less than because you were there supporting my education, even though your schooling was not done. And it just didn't seem to faze you the way that I think for a lot of men in our culture growing up, it would have felt somewhat emasculating or It would have felt wrong to them.
Yeah, I'm pretty awesome. No, I mean, thinking about it, I mean, I remember a little awkward conversation. It wasn't awkward to me when people in the Louisiana Congregational, well, what are you going to school for? And I'm like, oh, I'm working. I work here, there, whatever. And why are you here? Oh, well, Jackie's going to school. She's at LSU, blah, blah, blah. I just never was a big deal.
Right.
Whether that's my super cool personality, I don't know, but it just made more sense to me. And it always made sense of, you're further along. Let's do this. I'll get there. I did attend Weber State before my LDS mission.
Weber State University.
And I was not a fantastic student. And so I wasn't real excited about going to school. My dad was a blue collar worker and it seemed fine to me. I think my older brother did graduate from college and then I did graduate. I don't think any of my other siblings,
I don't think so. Any of them
went to college or graduated. Again, to me, it was always a good plan and it worked.
Yeah. And you did graduate. You do have your bachelor's degree.
I'm not just a mouth breather or a pretty face. Yes.
But we did decide that because at some point we would have kids and I would be the one having those kids, I did not want to be going to school and pregnant or having children at home. And so that's the decision we made.
Right. So we did move back to Utah and I did start back at Weber State University. You started an internship with...
Well, no, I got my first job because when we moved back to Utah after I graduated, I would have been employed.
Well, when did you work for the state or the Boys
County?
And Girls County or whatever? You worked for Salt Lake County.
That was in my bachelor's internship. Yeah.
So we moved back. You were working. I was working part-time, going to school. I think we eventually had a child and I quit, went to work full-time. You continued to work. We continued to have children.
Yeah. When our oldest was born, I still worked full-time. And then after our second child was born, I went to part-time work.
Yeah, I went back to school later.
Did you go back after we had 3 kids?
We were in the second house in Layton.
Right.
So Grace was
3 when we moved there. So you would have
went back to school.
Yeah, we would have had all of our kids. So you were working. So Jeff landed, I mean, the way people land in different careers, Jeff not landed there, but when he was working and going to school after we moved back to Utah, you were working as an electrician wiring houses. And then we were coming up on, I don't remember when it was, but you knew that like the housing market was not stable. Like that was that big balloon that was happening that eventually crashed.
Well, I think I got tired of working outside. And
yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to be an electrician. So I kept going to school and I was an apprentice and I was running the crews because I'd been there so long, but I was getting paid less. And I'm like, this is dumb. What am I doing? And eventually left there and went to work for a manufacturer's rep for lighting. So I went to work for a manufacturer's rep for lighting and then got into the electrical industry. I'm not going to give my resume, but
I mean, that is a career that you're still like moved from like the low voltage to high voltage.
It did. Yeah.
And you've been beyond sales or whatever. Now you're more managerial. You have that experience, but it was one of those things where you started because you could work this job and go to school. And then you continued moving in the field into different positions and different directions. And yeah, so that's what you're doing now. So very, very different from what I do when you're involved in
yes.
high voltage electrical stuff.
I'm more of a therapy support than a therapist. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And so then somewhere along the line, let me think, when was it that I started shifting my career? So I had started out in substance addiction and then I moved into sexual trauma. That was the next position. They had hired me to do work in sexual trauma. Not that I had experience in that. And that's not something you really get a lot of training for in grad school. Also, not when I was in grad school. You get trauma training nowadays in grad school, but not in the 90s. And so I had to learn how to work with that population. And so I worked with sexual trauma. And then I was recruited to work in sex addiction by a different company before I pursued my CSAT. And to me, it seemed like a logical next step, combining what I learned in substance addiction and what I learned in sexual trauma, to combine those two. It just seemed like a natural and next step to me. I could see a lot of parallels in those two. I still had a learning curve, but I could see a lot of parallels in those two.
Yeah, I think you worked for the LDS Church and then you went out on your own. Thinking of some of your questions, is it hard to be married to a therapist? Here's one thing that's hard is we live in a day and age of cell phones, and your ringer is constantly off. So early on in your career, when you don't come home at midnight and your husband's home with 3 kids wondering where the hell you are, and I decide to drive over to your office that's fairly close, and I come storming in there and you're in there with a client, and I'm like,
not at midnight.
It wasn't midnight, but it was late.
Or I was in there talking to Rachel.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I have learned that there's some late nights.
Yeah.
You're figuring things out. Things, you don't use a recipe. There isn't always a script. You're working through things, and this is definitely not a 9-to-5 job. And when you're done, you're done. And I'm a wee bit of a worrywart. And so I learned to get over that. Not that I don't still worry. And sometimes it is midnight, but
not with clients.
I have figured out that this is how things work. And I think that was a learning curve for me, that how therapy works.
Well, and I remember one of the struggles we would have is because sometimes you would pick up extra side jobs, wiring houses to earn extra money, and you would do it with a coworker or whatever. So I knew you were together. I also knew you tended to get hurt on a lot of these side gigs.
It makes me sound like I'm Gerald Ford and I trip it over my own feet. And
no, I'm not saying that. But there were times you got hurt and you didn't have your cell phone always on you because of the nature of what you were doing. And so there were times that it's midnight and I can't get a hold of you and you're not responding to my text and you haven't for 2 hours. And I would never go out in the middle of the night and go looking for you and show up at the place that you were working. But then when you did that, I was like, wait a minute, why can you do that, but I cannot do that?
Maybe you're not as big a worrywart as I am.
Or maybe I just had children sleeping at home.
Maybe. Anyway, there was a learning curve for both of us.
Yes, there was a learning curve.
The whole side job thing eventually just ended. It needed to end, and were in a different stage of life, and it needed to stop.
Yeah.
Because there was lots of late nights and weekends.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think you were always open to what I was learning. I mean, I tend to talk to you about most things. The things I don't talk to you about, it's just because nobody has that much time. But I talk to you about a lot of things. And so I think you were willing to learn with me the things that I was learning. And I think that impacted you as well, because it's not like I was learning your job, but you were learning things about my job.
True. And I think that's one way in our relationship that you feel love is you have this worried look on your face. So what I'm going to say, I think that's one way that you feel love is to be listened to.
Yeah.
Which has taken me time to learn that in therapy. So if you're thinking about therapy, get into therapy. Don't wait. That's probably my one regret is I waited too long to get into therapy. So take that little bit of advice.
Yeah.
And moving on to the next topic.
And you're probably the only one in your family who's done therapy.
Yeah, they all need it.
I think you talked to your one brother underneath you a little bit.
Yeah,
about it because he's having some struggles. But
I think I've talked to him about that, and he certainly needs it and should go.
I know there was a time period, I was going to ask it as a question, but I know there was a time period in which, and again, maybe you felt this way and we had to kind of work through it, where you felt like you were married more to a therapist than a spouse, or you would confuse those two roles.
I think early on, I think therapy, it's kind of a double-edged sword. And yeah, I mean, don't therapy me. I think those words came out of my mouth, whether it was true or not. Again, I think that was more on me learning as far as emotions and abilities in talk therapy. You're a NASCAR driver. You're at the pinnacle of your career. And I'm on a Razor scooter, you know. I mean, I am not where you are as far as growth emotionally and however you want to word it. But yeah, for sure. I've talked to my therapist about it, that you're the expert in the field. And so as we talk about feelings and emotions, and I've got all kinds of dysfunction. My father showed love by putting your head down and working. And that's how he showed love, because he gave everything to the family by working, earning a living. I'm getting emotional. Well, guess what I learned? You know,
Right.
and me, Gene, my uncle, used to say, if you got problems, you're not working hard enough. And that was the generation, and that's what was taught. So trying to unwind that. Can we say 4-letter words on here? Are you going to
Yes,
get?
we can say
Oh,
4-letter
good.
words.
So to unwind and sift through that shit, it's complicated, more complicated than I have anticipated, you know, as you're sitting in therapy and trying to figure out emotions and how I feel love and how you feel love. And yeah, it's a complicated, but I'm not a therapist. I mean, I used to joke, you know, I get all the free therapy I don't want, but it's not true. And I have stopped saying that. Because I should probably take all I can get.
Let's see. Were there times in our relationship where my training, this kind of goes along with what you were saying, where my training or my knowledge felt like a double-edged sword?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've traveled a lot, you know, and people are like, your wife's traveling for work. Isn't she a therapist? And it's like, yeah, but she's a CSAT. She's here, she's there, she's improving. I joke that your credentials behind your name don't fit on a business card. I mean, it's a lot. Do I support it? Yeah. I mean, do I have to step up and be a parent? Yep. You know, and something you used to say is, you're not babysitting, you're parenting, Jeff. And it's like, oh, you're right. I need to step it up and be a parent.
Mhm.
I'm not babysitting. These are my kids, you know?
Because even when I was working part-time, and I would typically work 2 days a week, but they were like 10-hour days. And so you would have the evenings with, I would often get home 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and
Yeah. And I'm
you
not,
were
I
home
would,
with the kids.
yeah. And I would joke and say, I'm not a good mother. It just made some long days.
Yeah. Because you would come home from work. They might go to a daycare or whatever after school, but you would come home from work and pick them up, and you had them for the evening and homework and dinner and whatever.
Yeah. And I again, learn life lessons of, hey, you need to sit down and read with the kids. Hey, you make dinner, clean up dinner, you know, and I have absolutely have made some mistakes, and I am hard-headed, and have worked through some issues and learned how to be a parent to 4 or 5 girls and 3 dogs. And yeah, it can be a lot. So I mean, is it a double-edged sword? I don't know that if you took me back in time and me and Uncle Rico, we would do the same thing. I don't know that I would probably change my attitude and change things about me, but I don't know that I would change the situation.
Which I think, if you're going to have two parents that work, both parents have to be very involved in the parenting. One cannot do that and work. And I know there were times in your career where, whether I was traveling for work or the kids were sick, and I had canceled sessions the week before because a different kid was sick, and I can't just keep canceling my sessions week after week while this thing goes through our house. And you were willing to take time off work and to cancel. This was maybe the early 2000s. So work from home really wasn't even a concept, really. And I know you got flack from bosses, supervisors, like, can't your wife deal with this? And you would have to push back and say, she did last week, it's my turn.
Yeah, I think I took all kinds of shit because our marriage, I don't think, is the traditional model, especially in Utah. And there was pushback from traditional bosses. I can think of some situations and things that were said. And yeah, I mean, I think I used to leave early on Thursdays from a particular, or every day, because I'd go pick up the kids.
I was working 2 days a week, so you would go
Thursdays
you
and
would go in
Thursdays or
early
something.
and get off early on
Yeah, and I
Tuesdays and
took all kinds of
Thursdays.
crap for leaving early Tuesdays, Thursdays. And again, I don't know that I would change our situation. I mean, it is what it is, and we dealt with it and we worked through it. And yeah, it was difficult, but you know.
And you would tell me if you got pushback, or I don't know that you always told me what was said, but I knew if you got pushback.
Jackie, I am a great communicator, so I don't know about. I am not a great communicator. I am a very blindly loyal employee and throw my heart and mind into it, and it's hard to. That's why I'm in therapy. But yeah, I'm a workaholic.
But you would talk to me about like if you got pushback, and I knew that, and you didn't talk to me about it in a way where you were trying to make me feel guilty at all. You were just talking to me.
Informative.
Yes.
I wasn't pissed. I wasn't mad. It was just like I took some shit at work for this.
Yeah. Yeah. I never felt like you were upset at me or felt like I shouldn't be asking you to do this. But I was aware if you got pushback. And I was grateful that you would take the pushback and not.
Again, I think we're not the norm, or at least in the past, it didn't fit the mold of this Utah typical relationship. You know, why is your wife doing that? We're trying to have a 50-50 relationship, and I need to pick up, it's right now it's 75-30 or 70-30, and I need to step it up. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I am aware, and I think we've had this conversation before. I am aware that you got pushback, not just at work. You definitely got pushback at church. I know there were multiple times because there were time periods where I was asked to teach adult Sunday school, and having a female teach adult Sunday school who is educated, who's articulate, I would get pushback from some of the men in the ward, in the class. And some of them would outright tell me I'm wrong, or you're interpreting that scripture wrong. And I would say, well, I'm a female. I think I'm just interpreting it different. And so they would give me pushback, and I would push back. But then you would hear comments, because you typically were not in my Sunday school class. And then you would say, somebody in the hallway said, boy, I'm glad I'm not married to your wife. Or, boy, I bet you never win an argument.
Yep, because I'm thinking of one particular congregation in Layton where it's the older generation and that thought process of you should be watching the kids in the nursery or in the primary, or not teaching.
And certainly not teaching adult men.
Oh, yeah. Who?
Like, it's one thing if I was teaching adult women, but I was teaching both.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. Sometimes you're not. Jeff is a very witty person, and Jeff has a very dry sense of humor, which when I was getting to know him, sometimes I would be sitting next to him and he would make comments under his breath that I could hear. And I was like, he's funny. He is funny. But sometimes when people approach you and make a comment like that, I mean, who's prepared for that? And I know there were times where you're like, I didn't even know what to say. I think it happened enough that you had some responses and you could say, well, it's a good thing you're not married to her.
Yeah, I think it caught me off guard when we moved into that area and these good old Mormon philosophies and traditions. And again, we didn't fit in that box. Yeah, and I think it did catch me off guard, and it took me a while to figure out my responses to like, what in the hell are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. Or sometimes you'd say to me after church, what happened in Sunday school today? Because you weren't even there. Like, you didn't even know what happened.
I'd catch all the comments and the hallway talk, and yeah, for sure, going, what's going on?
And then there were times when I wasn't teaching, but we were both sitting in Sunday school together, and I might make a comment and get a lot of pushback from all the men in the room about how wrong I am, which, by the way, I don't think I was. But I knew you sitting by my side, I felt strength from you. I never felt like you were like embarrassed or thinking that I was too much. I think I got that feeling a lot at church, that I was too much, but I did not get that feeling from you. And to be fair, there's times that you call me out. You had gotten a couple of comments about like, oh, I bet you never win an argument. And I said to you, wait, do you feel that way? And we had several conversations about that. Like, no, that's not how we argue. We don't have a winner and a loser in arguments. We talk about it, right? We try to see each other's points of views and get to where we can understand each other. But that was not what they were assuming was happening in our marriage.
Yeah, and I don't think I appreciated their sentiment that I was a spineless jellyfish and that you wore the pants in the family. And I think it's a team effort. I
Yeah.
got my own pants to wear.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Because that was also insulting to you.
You're right. So, yeah, I didn't appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So pivoting away from just, my work and how that has shaped our family, shaped our relationship. Not that we can't still talk about that, but what would you say in terms of how we have managed to keep our relationship strong despite ups and downs over the years? And
I think it's me learning to trust your insight, your intuition, your gut on things. And again, I'm hard-headed, and so I think it has taken me years to go, you know what, she's probably right, she's got some good insight, you should listen, Jeff, because again, you're the black belt of emotions and working through some of these things, which I am grateful for, especially with our kids. And
okay, so we have our 17-year-old plus dog with us who he's deaf, he's demanding. Let me just take a break so we can deal with whatever he thinks he needs. Okay, so it's not that I think I'm always right. Because there are times that I definitely defer to you. I value your feedback. I value your insight. Your insight is different than mine.
Absolutely, it is different than yours. And I would say you are one of the most intelligent people I know. And sometimes you're missing the common sense aspect of it, where I'm a little more simple minded and go, well, what about this? So again, I think it's worked for us. Mm-hmm. Not that there hasn't been some learning curves, but I think I do have a different perspective than yours. Absolutely. And can appreciate your perspective. And over the years have come to value your perspective because it's different than mine.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think over the years, what have we done to maintain our connection, to maintain, 32 years is a long time. Like, I've known you longer than I've known probably anybody else, maybe my siblings, but, yeah, we've just known each other for so long. What would you say that we've done to reinvent the relationship, or not reinvent it, but evolve it, keep that connection?
I don't think we're different than anybody else. That, we have to work on our relationship. That it's work, and realizing, well, we need to schedule time for us. We need to have date night. We need to have connection. We need to talk. You're more political than I am, but I subscribe to certain podcasts and look at different things so that I have that in common with you. Mm-hmm. and talk to you. Am I as passionate about it as you are? No, it's not something that I really want to dig into and be passionate about, but I know that you are, which I wish you would gain more of an interest in wiring houses, Jackie, and electricity. I'm just kidding, but no, again, we're no different than anybody else. It takes work in the relationship, and realizing that for me is you got to work at it, because there's been times where I'm sucked into work and you're working and the kids, and we get pulled apart. Again, it's work. You've got to put into it.
Yeah, I would agree. And sometimes that work can be fun. I don't think it doesn't have to be super laborious, but I do think
it is.
I do think it has to be intentional.
Absolutely. You got to be intentional, and you've got to work at it. Yeah, it can be fun for sure.
And there's many phases that a relationship would go through over the course of 32 years with having kids. We're now at a place, our kids have pretty much mostly moved back with us, but we're now at a place where our kids don't need us the same way they used to need us.
Right. They've grown and need us in different ways. You are definitely not the same person I married. Hopefully I am not the same person. We have morphed and changed and become different people. I think I would be different if I married somebody else who wasn't a therapist.
Right.
I think your career has changed me in a positive way. Yeah, yeah. Hopefully you can say the same thing, other than my career is not as effective in our relationship as maybe yours has been emotionally and therapeutically and driving me and the kids to work on those things we need to work on.
Right.
I think we've gained some strength from that in times where we've needed it. Watching and listening to the podcast with our girls, still amazing to me that they have come so far, and we made those 4 or 5 girls. So
yeah, after you had listened to the podcast, because you were on dog duty when we were recording it, so you weren't really there as we were having the conversation. And then shortly after, you went to China for your job for a couple weeks and couldn't listen to it in China. And then when you came back, you were listening to it. And I remember you came to me and said, "We did that? They're so grown up." And again, these concepts that we had, that we talked about before we had kids, before we got married, about what that would look like. Sure, that morphed and evolved over the years. It wasn't exactly what we thought it would be before we had kids, but it was kind of fun to be like, yeah, it worked.
yeah, that's my new tattoo. I don't use a recipe. I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants. And I think you've got to change the plan as you go along. I think that's something I learned as these kids, that they're all different and they're not going to follow this predetermined path. I can remember one saying, I think she was just beginning to be a teenager, "I'm a free bird, Mom. Quit trying to put me in a cage. I'm a free bird." You know?
At the time she was 6, because I remember her telling me, because I wanted to know where she was, because she would go, I had no idea where she was going. And
Right.
I would say to her, "I need to know where you're going." And she would say, "I'm a free bird, Mom. Don't put me in a cage." And I'm like, "Baby, I don't want to put you in a cage. I'm just legally responsible to know where you are."
If there was GPS tracker, we would have stapled it to her shirt. But yeah, and just how different they are, and learning that you've got to change the plan to meet their different personalities, and they're never going to do this, they're never going to be that, but they can be this. Yeah, just life with kids is definitely a roller coaster. I think married to a therapist can be a roller coaster. Not all bad, but there is some ups and downs, and there's a learning curve to what that looks like. And you could probably say the same thing. There's a learning curve being married to a dumb salesman, and what that looks like. So
Not that I understand your career really well. I mean, you will talk to me about it and I think I can follow, but I can't really carry on a conversation with somebody about your career. I think there are times where we've gone to dinner for a business event and we're at a table and you're talking to people, and it's an opportunity for me to sit back and see you in your element and see you connect dots and connect different levels of the field. And I like those opportunities, just sitting back and seeing you come alive, because there is a passion you have with your field. I mean, there have been times, listeners, where Jeff will say to me, "Have you noticed the lights in the produce department at the grocery store?" And I blank face, I'm like, "There's lights in the produce department at the grocery store?" "No, I haven't noticed them." And he's like, "Well," and he can go on this whole diatribe about the lights and how they got new lights. And I'm just like, I wouldn't have known. But there is a passion there for you. And I think for me, just seeing you in your element, with your knowledge, with your experience, and with the skill set that you have of like managing people, bringing them together, leading a team, that is, I enjoy seeing that. Like, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens. And, it's just those like, yeah, I'm proud to be his wife. I'm proud to be with him.
Well, say that again. Yeah, that was good. No, I'm same thing. To see you grow and change and go to this conference or go to this training and add to that knowledge, it's pretty awesome. So
if we mix it up a little bit, what would you say is the funniest thing or the strangest thing that you've experienced in terms of my career as my husband? I mean, I know there's times we'll be invited to a dinner party that's like not work related, and they'll say, "So what do you do for work, Jackie?" And you'll always say, "You need to know a disclaimer. This typically ends the party."
yeah, it's a friendship killer when I tell people what you do. In my latest job, and telling people what you do, and then they go out and find your podcast and they listen to it and they give me shit, and I mean, it's a little weird when we're out and about and you run into clients or former clients. Typically don't ask. I'm like, "Well, who is that?" "Oh, okay, that's enough said." Again, I've always been therapy support, and when you were doing different experiences and I was setting things up and taking things down, I kind of got okay, what's this for? And why do you do this? I mean, I think I have some insight that the normal person doesn't have who's not married to a therapist does.
Well, and especially one, like owning a group practice is probably different than when I was a therapist employed at a place or a solo practitioner, because I did that for a year or two and I didn't really enjoy that.
Right.
Here's our demanding dog again. Not that he needs anything. He does not need anything. So anything that you've thought of that, like, funniest, strangest things you've experienced?
Me showing up at 10 o'clock at night, beating on your door, wondering what the hell is going on and why you are not home. I think I was a quick learner. I think I only did that once or twice.
You are fine.
No, none that I can think of.
I did want to bring one situation up because I think also me being a therapist impacted our relationship and impacted you and me as well. But I also think having 4 girls impacted you. You came from a family, there's 5 kids total, there's 4 boys, and then your youngest sibling is a sister. Having 4 daughters, I think, changed you in a lot of ways. I mean, I think you're a great girl dad, but I also think there's been a lot of learning curves that came with that.
Agreed. I mean, there's lots of lessons learned. People are like, well, I wish you had a boy. No. I mean, this is all I've known. Did we keep having kids because we wanted a boy? No. I think we kept having kids because we're like, well, we want one more. We just happened to be girls. It's not easy to be a girl dad. Sure. I don't know any different. So I don't know what parenting boys is like.
Right. I mean, in some ways, like, not maybe young boys, but I think like the nephews in my family have always loved you and look up to you. And, like, even when they would come to our house for family gatherings, they wanted to play with Jeff. I mean, I remember when we were dating and I had a cousin, and my mom's the oldest, and this was the son of the youngest sibling of my mom, which was, there were 6 kids, and he was maybe 4 or something, and he just adored you. And he would always ask, like, is Jeff going to be there? And then I would say to him, like, Spencer, what's my name? And he's like, you're Jeff's girlfriend. And I'm like, I am family. I am the one you are related to. I am not Jeff's girlfriend. But so I think in some ways, that my younger nephews have always, like, been drawn to you. But then, we have had our kids. I mean, our kids used to bring home injured birds and pets or whatever. And then eventually they just started bringing home kids to live with us. And, Lillian has lived with us now for, I don't know, 5 years or so. But I think she was the first girl that ever lived with us. We had boys that lived with us, which seeing you step in as a father to them, most of them had not a good relationship with their father or weren't sure about that relationship with their father. And so they, like, you would step in and you would play that role as a father to them. And I think that influenced, I think that shaped, like, not just your daughters, because I think your daughters saw you taking that role. I saw you taking that role. Like, it was, those were one of the things that like, every time I would see you do something like that, like, my heart just softened, and I would be like, not that it was hard, but it was just one of those, like, yeah, he is a good person.
I'm not going to pat myself on the back. I just didn't know any different. I'm like, oh, that's what you do. I mean, this kid's there's multiple, but they don't have a father figure. Well, I'm going to continue to be that to my kids, and you're here, so that's what you get.
Mm-hmm. And even if they didn't live with us, like, I remember one time you came home from work and you came in the garage, and like, our youngest had a group of friends here, and you came in, you were like, hey, who's driving the van outside? And one of them was like, oh, that's my van. And you said, well, your tires are low. You can't be driving on those tires. You need to get air. Let's go out in the garage and I will fill up the tires. And it was like all of the kids were like, I want to learn how to do that. I want to learn how to do that. And they all migrate out to the garage, and you're teaching them how to put air in the tire, how to measure the pressure in the tire.
Part of it is I was raised by a sailor who said, what the hell are you doing driving around on low tires? Go put air in those tires. So it's like, got to put air in those tires, because I can hear my dad yelling at me. So don't give me too much credit.
No, I think you deserve credit on that. And you didn't sound like a sailor, but you would teach them how to do these things. Our youngest, when you were wiring our basement at this house, she was like, I want to learn how to do that. And you were like, okay, let me show you. And even, I mean, there were times when we lived in Layton and, you needed help moving something or picking something up. And you would just come into the girls and be like, hey, I need help. And me and the girls would come out to help you move something. And if one of our neighbors saw that, they'd come over and be like, oh, no, why didn't you come get me? Like, why would you ask your daughters? And you're just like, because that's who's here. Like, that's who I have.
That's our workforce. That's who we got. So
Right.
It doesn't matter if they're boy, girl, or whatever. You're going to help and
Right.
grab the other end and let's do this. I mean, moving, landscaping, rocks in this yard, Grace, Lily, get your gloves. Let's go.
Right.
I mean, it just is what it is. I don't know that I thought much about it.
But I think for a lot of people, and I will just say for me, that is not what I had. That's not the father that I ever, my father did not look after me. My father was not making sure that I was safe or that I had what I needed. My dad was not doing that. And I know there's a lot of kids, like we've had them live with us or we've had them in our house, and that's not their experience.
Yeah, I think both of us grew up and don't want to be per se our fathers. Your father has a special nickname, and my father would have been Boot in Butt. And so it's like, well, get out there and do it.
Jeff nicknamed my dad the sperm donor.
I wasn't going to say it. Yeah, I don't want to be your father, and I don't want to be my father. And so trying to be something different.
I remember, I think our oldest was about 10. And I don't know what was going on, but there was an issue or something. And you came to me and you said, do you think men can be feminists? And I said, oh, I hope so. And I said, I mean, we need men to be feminists if this is ever going to change. And I said, why? And you said, I think I'm a feminist.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that played into that because I could see the discrimination in church with our daughters. And it just grew and grew. And it just, as I was in different leadership positions and I could see the inequality, and it used to just burn my butt. And it's like, there's no reason for it other than your
patriarchy,
stupid ass thinking and patriarchy. And my kids are as good as your kids. I don't care if you have boys and I have girls, split that budget equally. And there's some horrible examples that I won't give, but yeah, I could just see the inequality. And I think we raised our kids to see it. And there's one of them that was never going to work for her. And she was never really in, and she sure as hell wasn't going to put up with any of that. And I think you and I found ourselves sitting in church one day going, why are we here and our kids aren't here? There's some other reasons that we would continue to go. Yeah, I think we've passed that on to them. I don't think I'd raise them any other way.
Right.
Other than they're as good as the next person. And
I don't know that we were raising them to leave religion.
No, not at all.
I think we were just trying to be good parents to them and meet them where they were. And again, like I've said before, maybe if we had 2 girls and 2 boys, we might have fallen into some gender roles where if you needed something lifted, you would have asked the boys and not the girls. Maybe. I don't know, but we didn't have that. And so we were working with what we had, and we were just going with that. I mean, I feel like I had a feminist awakening in high school and college, but being the mom to 4 daughters, that feminist awakening had a long way to go and just kept coming. But I think it also was happening for you as we would see the discrimination, as we'd see some of these gender biases.
I would agree. I'm a kind of a late bloomer, and learning as our kids grew, and learning as we had 4 or 5 girls, and learning and seeing. Yeah, absolutely is. It is a process.
I don't know that you were a late bloomer. I just don't know that you saw it. It wasn't in your like it just wasn't always in your face. I mean, I don't know that even in the religion we grew up in, that it was in your face, because it just seemed normal. That was just the teaching. That was just the culture, until we had daughters and we're like, whoa, wait a minute. This isn't okay.
I would agree. You and I grew up in it from the earliest age possible, and it was the norm. And you would walk home from school on Wednesdays, and you would go to primary on Wednesdays, and then you'd go to church on Sunday, and then during the week you'd have youth activities, and that's what you did. And there's your social network, and you don't talk to the other ward because they're that invisible boundaries down the middle of the street, and it's just taught from a very young age, and it was normal.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But I think for both of us, wanting something different for our kids pulled things out of us that maybe wouldn't have been otherwise.
True. Yeah. But I mean, that's what you want, is you want something different for your kids,
Mhm.
something better.
And I think even because I think the first child that our daughter brought home, to be clear, she had just met him that night at her friend's house. She had met him. He was our oldest daughter. It was her friend's younger sister's friend. And their family was leaving, and they asked our oldest daughter, Alex, to bring him home. So she was going to bring him home, and they get in the car, and he's like, I don't want to go home. And I think they went to Starbucks. I think they went to McDonald's, and he was just like, I don't want to go home. And Alex said, well, I do. So do you want to come to my home? And he was like, yeah. So she brought him home, made up a bed on the couch downstairs, texted us and was like, hey, just so you're aware, there's a boy asleep in the basement. I brought him home with me. He's on the couch. His name's Aaron, right? And we woke up to that text and we're like, okay, that's new. And he lived with us for a year. And during that time, I think he healed some family relationships, and he came out as gay. Our oldest two daughters were the first persons that he said, I think I'm gay. And their response was, we do too. We also think you're gay, right? And our kids will say that he said, well, what will your parents think? And they said, our parents won't care. And he said, but your parents are Mormon. And both of our kids, I remember they said, well, they're not that kind of Mormon. But even last week when Lillian's boyfriend, Charlie, was in a motorcycle accident, he called you. And you and Lillian rushed over to the scene of the accident, but he'll ask you to go do things with him. And his parents live in Connecticut, so it's not like his dad is around or his mom is around to go do things with, but he'll ask you to go do things with him. When he got in the accident, he called you.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a good time, Jackie. So,
you are a good time.
No, and I hope our kids, teach them to be accepting. I know it was a little weird when Aaron came to live with us to see, okay, how do our kids see us? And I think we had that conversation of what kind of Mormons are we?
Yeah, because I remember him asking us once at dinner, do I have to go to church with you guys? And we were like, no. If you're gay, you should definitely not be in church with us. Like, no. And just knowing that would not be a good place for you to be as you're
not a safe place.
As you're coming out at 15, coming out to yourself, coming out to other people, you've got to come out to your family. Yeah, no. And he was not LDS. He wasn't raised LDS or anything like that. But still, just his parents' culture, he wasn't sure he would be accepted. And I think that's one of the things we've talked about, because it drives me crazy. These dads who feel like one of their jobs is to protect their daughter's virtue, or basically to protect their daughter's sexuality. And there's those jokes about the dad having a shotgun when the boy comes to pick her up on a date or whatever. And that was never you. You never did that. But I remember as our kids were, in their teen years and approaching dating, and us having conversations, and I was saying to you, I don't think you have to do that, because you have a good relationship with them. They know how to be treated and how they should expect to be treated by the male gender. And that's so normal to them that I don't know that it's your job. At this point, it would be too late if we hadn't already done that. And so I think in many ways, you having your own feminist awakening, it would be different if it was me that had the feminist awakening as a female with 4 daughters. But as a dad, having that, I think, allowed them to grow in ways that it wouldn't have been if it was just me. Yeah. Let's see. Any other things that we wanted to talk about? Maybe one last question and then we'll wrap up. But any difficult truths that either of us have had to face along the way as we've learned and grown with each other, that then we've had to face other difficult truths that maybe we were blind to or were hidden from us?
That's quite a question. I think I said this before, but learning to trust you emotionally and therapeutically, and to listen that you have gained all this experience and insight, and to trust that, I don't always have to be right either, but when you're like, hey, my radar's going off, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And then finding out, yeah, your radar should have been going off because you were right in different situations. Again, learning to trust your expertise. This is what you do, and you have some great insight and a different perspective, and and to listen, and for me to listen and learn and go, you know what, you should listen more. And that's not easy to do. Sometimes it's like, okay, you need to take a breath. Jeff, just listen. Okay, yep, you're right. I think that's helped me through some difficult times, whether it's job changes or personnel problems or whatever it is. Just listen. Me coming to you going, hey, will you read this email? Hey, will you just double check me? Just, am I taking the right approach here? And then be able to you go, no, you need to do this. And for me to go, okay, all right, you're right. I didn't see that. Thank you. And then to listen and to take that advice.
Yeah. I mean, I know like the last job you had, and they recruited you to work there, and then you had to build a team. And, your job is mostly in male dominated fields, with it being high voltage electrical stuff. That's not a field that typically attracts females. But I know that you were, at the time you're building this team, you had hired some males, but you were also like, it's not like females can't do this. Is a sales job and entering information. They can do this job. And some of them would apply for that position. It was interesting to see you hire some of them were single moms, and knowing like, okay, they're going to need a different work schedule because they got to go pick up their kids. And we had already traversed that in our own relationship. And so I think you were the boss that I wish you had had when we were going through that. And, if they also work from home was more of an option, so they could pick up their kids from school, have time with their kids, get their kids to bed, and then finish their day's job. And you didn't care. You trusted them, and you would mentor them in the field on your team.
Yeah, I think I had a little more empathy and a little more understanding of what that's like. And yeah, I did hire quite a few females, and that team is still there, and I think they're doing awesome. And I think I was more open to females because they can do the same job. Yeah, and it was nice to go, you know what, here's the job, get it done. I don't care that you come in at 9 or 10 because you got to take your kids to school. Just get the job done.
And they proved trustworthy there. It's not like they weren't doing their job.
Yeah. And so them doing the job, they're capable of the job. Absolutely. They got the right person for the right job. But being able to be flexible and work with them, I think I had some insight to that. And I mean, you want to be the boss you want to work for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a feminist, and that's my new tattoo. So.
And I know at first you would get some teasing, and you got some shit at work, and they would say,
what's Jeff's harem doing now?
Yeah, or Jeff's compiling this team of polygamists. Jeff's a polygamist. And I remember you came home one day, because it bothered you that they would say that. And you came home one day and you were like, one of them was saying something about you creating this team, being a polygamist or whatever. And you had just said, well, I like to call it being a feminist. And it just shut it down.
Yeah, I don't remember
that day.
But I mean, again, what would I change if I was still in that role? I don't think I'd change anything. I think I'd still hire them all.
Okay, let me just ask this. So what do you feel like? Because I know we've had hard times. There's been busy phases, and in busy phases, there's hard times. And that makes the hard time a little harder because you're busy and there's less time for like the relational connection. Then there's been busy with parenting and stuff like that in the age of our kids. Then there's been other times when we're busy. What, if you could reflect on that, what do you think got us through some of those the ups and downs and just the difficult times or the busy times where there's not as much time to really spend in the relationship.
I mean, what got us through? I don't know. Us knowing each other for a long time. Yeah, Jackie, there was quite some lulls. I think somebody had a great idea to start a restaurant and have small children and then have church duties on top of that, plus a full-time job. And, I mean, it just...
I don't think I've talked about that before. I don't think listeners knew that we went through owning a restaurant at one point.
Somebody got a great idea in the 2000 era, and
99, 2000, yeah.
And it was rough. And I don't think I've been so tired. And I think we gave our all into this, and it just lack of experience and trying to figure out, we had too many workers right up front, and we didn't borrow enough money, and just life lessons. How did we get through? I think, boy, at times there, I thought I was going to pop. We got to stay together, got to be focused. And I think you were focused on my dream and stuck with it. And I think that was a kind of a shitty time for us, and did some things that were really hard. And I don't want to relive some of those experiences. I think we came away stronger, and it's easier to look back than to look forward and go, oh my God, I can't climb that I can't climb out of that hole and that mess. And I think there was a lot of tears and a lot of trials and a lot of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I mean, we stuck together. I mean, because I was crumbling, and so it was more 90-10 on your part, trying to get through that, and maybe even 95-5 on your part, to get through that. Yeah, I mean, just sticking together, having each other's back. I think you did more than your share of propping me up. And so then as you go to these different trainings and learn, I need to be conscious and be aware and have your back and stand up and be that 90-10.
There were also times, I mean, I'm a business owner, and that's always a financial risk to own a business. And I never felt like you were not supportive of that. And there's been varying levels over the time that I've owned my business of ups and downs financially and how much it impacts our finances or different things like that. And sometimes I will say, I feel bad. I feel guilty. And you're typically saying, we're in this together. We'll get through this. You'll figure it out. I know a couple of years ago when I was really questioning, do I even know what I'm doing? And you were saying, Jackie, nobody's this lucky. Of course, you know what you're doing. You're just hitting some things and you got to figure those things out. But you didn't make it this far on luck. But, both of us have lost both of our parents and had to go through not just, the death of parents, but also sorting through those relationships and the impacts of those relationships and that upbringing. And I think both of us could witness for each other because we knew each other's families from young ages, even though we didn't know them very well. We could witness some of that journey. Maybe I wasn't on it when your dad passed away the way that you were on it, or when your mom passed away. I could witness for you what was happening.
Yeah, if you're really that lucky, let's go to Vegas. You've done a great job. You've built a great business. Things are moving. Things are progressing. I want to support. I want to be that 90-10, even if I have to be the HVAC guy, the electrician, and the water boy. Yeah. I mean, because you've done the same. So, I mean, I think in relationships, it's give and take. It's work, just like we said. You've got to participate. And you may not know what to do, but you got to participate. So get up and participate.
Yeah. And I think we learned early on when I was working late nights, the food doesn't care who makes it. The dishes don't care who do it. Like there's not, as a female, I don't do the dishes better than you do. They need to be done. But it's not like some of those things that are so gendered could not be. I mean, I would not have let you leave the dishes for me to do the next day, by the way. But you didn't. I think too, just because we've been together so long and known each other for so long. I mean, there's still some things that sometimes you will do that surprise me, not in a bad way, but like just like or maybe I haven't seen a certain trait of yours for a while, and then I see it and I'm like, oh yeah, it shows up different at this age or this phase of life than it used to. I'm not thinking of anything in particular. Don't get worried. But I have a list in my head. I have this running list of why I love you, why I'm safe with you, why I'm secure with you, that even during the hard times, I know that list is there. I mean, I don't know if I've ever said that I have this list.
Oh, should I have a list? Do I need to write this down?
No, it's not anything bad. It's just these moments of you being you. Like I said, you not feeling bad about the fact that we were in Louisiana for my schooling, not your schooling, even though the men in that ward thought that was weird. You didn't. Or I know I've talked about this a little bit before with some of my clients where I do not enjoy that whole traditional man opens the car door for woman. Especially, I mean, it's one thing if we're both getting in the car and you open the door for me and I get in. That is not a big deal. But if I'm sitting in the car and I have to wait for you to walk around the car to let me out, like I have the child locks on or something, I don't like that. And I told you that. You've known that. And sometimes we would go out on dates with couples and the husband would do that. And if it was just the two of us, I knew you would not do that because I don't want you to do that. That feels uncomfortable to me. But there were times where the other husband is doing it. And I know you feel that pressure because I know where that pressure comes from. And you don't do it. You let me get myself out of the car. And I know that that's not because that's what you want to do or what you would expect. It's because you know that what I want. And it's things like that where it's not like we both agree on that. I mean, I don't think you care one way or the other, but it's not like we both agree. But I had said to you a lot, like, I don't like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to do that. Like I can't open my own car door. And so seeing that pressure moment and being like, oh no, I know what he's feeling. And you don't cave to that peer pressure. You just let me get out of open my own door.
Well, I think we were raised in the tail end of this generation of that's what you do. And
right.
We had etiquette classes and you pull the chair out so they can sit down for your date. You open the restaurant door and woman stands up, you stand up kind of thing. That some of those society norms have changed and you didn't want that anyway, which was fine with me. Made me feel uncomfortable too. So
yeah. But I think there are those like, I get to determine how I am respected. I don't want to do it these traditional ways. I don't want, if they're saying this is how you respect a woman, well, what if I don't want to be respected that way? What if that doesn't equal respect to me?
You're a free bird. I wasn't going to stuff you in a cage. So, yeah.
And so I think in that process, and I know we have told our kids this as they got into dating ages, and we only have one who's married, and they're just navigating these adult relationships and romantic relationships. And we say, who you know us as today is not where we started out. We have come a long way. And yes, we have figured some things out. And we don't have a ton of conflict and we know how to work through it when it shows up, and we can provide security when that's needed and things like that. But we will tell our kids what is needed is that both people need to understand they're entering this relationship with some issues. Nobody's right and nobody's wrong, but the two of you have got to figure those things out. And both people have to be open to being wrong. Both people have to be open to growth. And I think if you can do that, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good start.
Good advice, yes. And learn some of that the hard way.
Yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
I appreciate the opportunity and how much fun this has been. So thank you.
You've been kind of reserved.
I'm just trying to tone it down a little bit and not be inappropriate.
Yeah. Jeff will have former colleagues, former employees who still listen to my podcast. And so he can't go full Jeff. I don't know why. You could have gone full Jeff. He's a little more reserved than typical.
Never go full Jeff. Don't do it. You don't give in. Right.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us in this conversation. At the end of this episode, I want to remind you that your story matters. Remember, there's something meaningful in every chapter. Don't wait to share your story until it's finished. Until next time, Jackie.